In this video I will show the various adjustments to make on the pendulum, then as well as winding the clock and setting the time. So first of all, I want to explain about how the escapement works, which will relate to how to orient the clock on the wall and why it is in the position that it's in. The main thing to have adjusted correctly is this floating lever of the escapement. That's lovely and elegant, but it needs to be oriented just right. Now, I showed before that piece down at the bottom that's put on down there to move the clock frame. By turning this, you move the clock frame to the right or to the left, the bottom of the frame. And I'll show you how that affects this. You can see how much it clears this peg as it sort of floats down. If you have the clock turned too far, the base of the clock turned too far to the right, when it comes down, it gets really close to the tip of that peg, and sometimes it might catch again on the peg. It's not doing it now, but if it comes down too much, it would just re-catch on the same peg like that, which of course would stop the clock if it keeps doing that. So if you notice that happening, that would mean that the base of the clock needs to be turned to the left, like that. If it's too far rotated too far to the left, the base of the clock, then this might clear that peg as it comes down. I'm just making it do that now, which would cause this to skip, and the wheel then would turn like that until the other lever catches it. So if you notice it skipping, then you know that the base of the clock needs to be turned a little bit to the right, the base of the frame. So this is just a fine-tuning adjustment that may or may not need to ever be done. Once you have this set in place, and you've got it running right, where it clears that peg enough, catches on the next one. The only time this may need to be adjusted is if, I would think, would be in a drastic change in humidity that happens quickly, like in the fall when you first turn the furnace on and the air dries out really fast, that kind of thing. Or in the spring when finally the windows get opened up and humid air is allowed in, that could possibly cause this to not quite be balanced quite right, and then you may need to readjust for that. But again, it's rare and it may never need to be done. And then another adjustment that may not ever need to be done is this balancing weight here. You can actually slide this to the right or to the left a little bit, which adjusts how far the pendulum swings this way, or this way. And that's, again, probably won't need to be done. I have it on there rather tightly, and it will just be that way in transport, and it shouldn't change. But if you ever notice, for example, that when it swings back, the pendulum hits something, like the frame up here, then you know it's swinging too far that way, too far to the left at the top. So then you would move this weight a little bit, just tweak it just an eighth of an inch, try that out to the right. Also then if it's swinging down, really seems to be swinging really far down to the right, or let's say if it swings so far to the right that this little lever here fails to release when it swings back, and then if the clock stops and this is just on that tooth like that, then you may need to move that little weight to the left to allow the pendulum to swing further this way so that this lever will clear. That's a lot of information that may never need to be used. You can see there's kind of an equal amount of recoil, they call it, after this releases, and then the continuing momentum of the clock lifts this lever away. And same with here, after this releases, then the pendulum keeps swinging further until it finally reverses direction. That's called recoil, and it should be about the same recoil on each side. And you just kind of go visually. And if if it's running, it's running. Then don't worry about it. This is called in clock language, it's called putting the clock in beat. And with a typical mantle clock or grandfather clock, it usually involves taking the whole clock and leveling it to the right or to the left to get the ticking to be even. That's what it's doing, is getting the ticking even. But here now everything is all out in the open, visual, so you don't go so much by the sound of the ticking as just by looking at it to make sure nothing is on the pendulum hitting something because it's swinging too far. So anyway, that's a lot of talk about something that will very likely never need to be done. But a more typical adjustment is the speed adjustment for any clock. And here it's done by turning this knob that is attached to this threaded rod that will actually move this whole frame piece up or down like that. So if the clock is running too fast and you want to slow it down, you would turn this clockwise like that, which actually pushes down on that and lifts up the top of that whole shaft, lifts it higher, which slows the clock down. And then on the other hand, if you want to speed it up, you would turn it to the left, and that would lower the top of the pendulum shaft. And I've found that a slight movement will make several minutes difference per day. I mean, just a very small movement of it. So if it's way off, you could try a quarter turn one way or the other. So it's turning it this way to the right or clockwise to go slower, counterclockwise to go faster. And I would suggest not worrying about it at all for the first few weeks. Let the clock get acclimated to your climate there, to the humidity level, relative humidity, before bothering with that. Because it would just be rather changeable for a while. But after a few weeks, if you notice consistently it's running fast or slow, then you could do that. Okay, winding is just by pulling on that cord that's hanging down below. So you pull on the left side of the cord like this to bring the weight up. And you can see it kind of tends to want to reverse this escape wheel. So if you make a rather quick pull, and sometimes it will kind of skip while you're doing it, but that's okay, nothing to worry about. And you can wind it all the way up to the pulley there. Then the pendulum will need to be pushed by hand to start the clock running, because while you're winding it, there's no power going through the mechanism to keep the pendulum swinging. So you'll need to use a long stick or something just to start the pendulum up. And that's same with setting the hands. You might, since this will be up so high, you know, or any wall where if this is up out of reach, you might have to use a long dowel or something. Put a dowel or some wood piece across to catch it like this and turn the hands like that. So that's how you set the time, just by turning the minute hand. And generally you can turn it backwards at least somewhat. Sometimes if the tension on here is a little bit more, it might start reversing this wheel when you turn it backwards. It doesn't really hurt it, but it's just a little bit annoying. But yeah, you can turn it back like that. And then the hour hand is simply on a tapered shaft. So if this ever gets loose, or like in transport, I don't know, or if it gets bumped, it's possible it could get loose. I'll just loosen it now. If it gets loose and gets pulled forward on that little shaft, then it can just flop around like that. So to get it in position, I normally put the minute hand straight up and then align the two hands like this. So it shows 12 o'clock. Get that in the, what looks like the best position. Then hold this gear tight and wiggle this hand to push it on tight. But I'll have it on there nice and tight now, so it probably will not have to ever be fiddled with. But that's just one thing to mention, just in case it ever needs it. So like that, and then you can set the time accordingly after that is done. As far as maintenance, there's no need for lubrication to do any oiling or anything like that. In fact, that should never be done. That would just collect dust in the bearings. Dusting, I just use usually a soft cloth like an old t-shirt to rub everything down. Maybe in the more delicate areas use a feather duster or even that compressed air to spray like between the gear teeth. I think that covers all everything as far as I can remember. This clock is made of cherry and walnut. The pendulum swings at approximately, I think it's approximately 2 3/4 seconds per beat. And that's it.